Welcome to Honeybee. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Real stories of love, lies, and betrayal, where every truth stings. Let's begin. Sometimes a single sentence can uncover the truth about an entire relationship. And sometimes the exact moment someone reveals their true nature is the moment you finally believe them. My name is Robert. The day my wife made one more dismissive remark. After months of taking my patience and support for granted, I realized I'd reached my breaking point. I'm 35 years old, working as a finance manager for a large corporate firm in Atlanta, Georgia. It's a demanding job that often pulls me into 60-hour work weeks, unplanned late nights to finalize deals, and constant availability for client emergencies. The pay is solid, but every cent is earned through stress, exhaustion, and endless mental strain. Managing intricate financial portfolios for high-stakes clients isn't easy. It drains you. I married Julia when I was 30 and she was 27. We'd been together for about 3 years before that, after meeting at a mutual friend's wedding. Back then, Julia was an HR coordinator at a mid-sized tech company. Our combined income gave us a comfortable life. In those early years, our relationship felt balanced and genuine. Julia was driven in her career, outgoing with her friends, and we handled our home responsibilities naturally. Neither of us was particularly domestic. We'd take turns cooking or simply ordering, split up chores, and function like two adults building a shared life together. Everything shifted the day Julia was laid off. Her company had been bought out, and the new management cut several redundant departments. Julia's whole team was let go with 3 months of severance pay. It happened abruptly, shaking her confidence and pride. I reassured her immediately that we'd be fine. My income was enough to sustain our home mortgage and lifestyle. I encouraged her to take her time finding the right opportunity. Instead of rushing into the first job, she could get out of panic. I wanted her to feel safe, supported, and unpressured through that transition. At first, Julia seemed thankful for that. She spent her days polishing her resume, networking with former colleagues, and applying for positions that suited her background. Each evening, she'd tell me about companies she'd reached out to, interviews she'd scheduled, or people she connected with. There was a sense of purpose in her routine, and I admired that. During those initial weeks, she also became more active around the house, something I appreciated deeply. She'd take care of small chores and sometimes have dinner ready when I came home after long days. I never asked her to do that. She did it on her own, wanting to contribute while she had free time. It felt fair and balanced, given our circumstances. I took pride in being able to provide during that phase. Growing up, I watched my father support my mother through her career shifts, and that shaped how I saw partnership. You carry extra weight when your partner needs you. I never guilted Julia over losing her income or pressured her to rush back to work. I genuinely wanted her to focus on finding something meaningful, not just something that paid the bills. But about 3 months later, subtle changes started creeping in. The daily updates about job applications stopped. When I asked how things were going, her answers became vague, generic excuses about not finding roles that matched her skills. She no longer talked about specific companies, networking events, or interviews. Her effort around the house also started fading. Laundry would pile up for days. Dishes sat in the sink overnight. The tidy home we once maintained slowly slipped into disarray. Julia's motivation seemed to vanish. By the 4th month, I'd come home to find her lounging on the couch, scrolling through her phone or watching TV. When I'd ask how her day was, she'd casually mention having lunch with a friend or running errands, none of which seemed related to job hunting. It was as if the job loss had turned into an indefinite vacation. The biggest shift came with meals. During the first few months, Julia often cooked dinner, which I appreciated more than she probably knew. After long hours at the office, it felt like care, but by the 5th month, that stopped. I'd come home to an untouched kitchen. The fridge would still be full of groceries I'd bought over the weekend, yet nothing had been cooked. I'd either make something quick for myself or order takeout while Julia stayed on the couch, absorbed in her phone. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe she was struggling emotionally, depression, anxiety, or burnout. I convinced myself to stay patient. Pushing her might only cause more harm, I thought. But inside, frustration was quietly building. I was exhausted from long days, yet still coming home to clutter and silence. It didn't feel like teamwork anymore. The moment everything changed came 11 months into Julia's unemployment. It was a Wednesday. I'd been at work since 6:30 that morning, handling an intense acquisition deal for one of our biggest clients. The entire day was spent negotiating terms, running numbers, and managing pressure from every side. By the time the deal closed at 7 p.m., I was completely drained mentally, physically, emotionally. I didn't even stop for dinner on the way home. I assumed Julia might have cooked, especially since I'd mentioned that morning I'd be working late. After a 13-hour day, the idea of coming home to a meal didn't feel unreasonable. It felt like a small, normal comfort. I pulled into the driveway around 7:30, stepped inside, and immediately noticed the kitchen hadn't been touched. The breakfast dishes from that morning were still in the sink, now joined by a coffee mug and a dirty lunch plate. The fridge was full, but dinner wasn't even started. When I walked into the living room, Julia was stretched out on the couch in sweatpants, watching a reality show while scrolling through her phone. She looked up briefly when I entered, gave me a half-hearted acknowledgement, and went right back to her screen. I took a breath, trying to keep my voice calm. I asked her, genuinely, not angrily, why she hadn't made dinner, especially since she'd been home all day. Her reply was sharp and dismissive. "I'm not your cook." That one sentence hit me harder than she probably realized. It wasn't just about food. It was about respect, partnership, and how she saw her role in our marriage. It was about whether she believed my efforts deserved reciprocity, or if she simply took them for granted. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I just turned and walked to the kitchen, grabbed a pack of instant ramen, and made myself dinner while she stayed glued to the TV. I ate standing at the counter, too tired to even sit, while my wife of 5 years scrolled through her phone in the next room as if I didn't exist. That night, as she slept beside me, I replayed everything: the months of laziness, the imbalance, the coldness. Our intimacy had nearly disappeared. The warmth we once had was gone. Even when we did have sex, it felt mechanical, empty. She rarely wanted affection, and our conversations had turned flat and disconnected. We weren't a team anymore. We were two people existing in the same house, bound only by routine and bills. And for the first time, I asked myself the question I've been avoiding. Why was I still married to her? What did she actually bring to my life? What would really change if I lived alone? The thought scared me, but it also gave me an odd sense of freedom. Divorce meant admitting failure, facing paperwork, dividing assets and painful conversations. But it also meant peace, an escape from resentment, from imbalance, from feeling invisible in my own home. The next morning, I didn't bring up the argument. I didn't plead for change. I made a quiet decision. I called a local cleaning and meal prep service that a colleague had recommended for a reasonable monthly fee. They'd come 3 times a week to clean and cook meals I could easily reheat. I didn't tell Julia. I didn't ask for her opinion or wait for another promise to do better. I simply took action. If she wasn't my cook or housekeeper, fine, I'd hire people who actually did those jobs. But that day also marked another quiet shift. I started documenting everything. I wasn't sure if I'd file for divorce yet, but I began preparing, just in case. From that day on, my mindset toward Julia shifted completely. I didn't raise my voice or start arguments, but something inside me had shut off. I became polite, distant, and emotionally detached. I no longer sought her company or tried to fix what was already broken. I stopped asking about her day, stopped updating her about work, and stopped making plans that involved we. My language changed. I started saying I instead. It was a subtle separation, but it said everything I couldn't bring myself to explain out loud. A week later, the housekeeper started coming in. She'd arrive mid-morning, clean for a few hours, and prepare meals I could easily reheat. It wasn't cheap, but the peace of mind was worth every cent. For the first time in months, I came home to a tidy house and food that didn't feel like a burden to arrange. Julia's reaction was immediate. The first night after the cleaner had been there, she confronted me angry and offended. She demanded to know why I'd hired someone without discussing it with her. She accused me of trying to replace her, of sending a message that she wasn't doing enough. I looked at her for a moment, then said nothing. I didn't have the energy to argue or justify anything. I'd simply reached the point where her opinion no longer mattered to my peace. That silence hit her harder than any words could. Julia was used to me being patient, calm, and willing to talk things out. But now I was cold, detached. I wasn't fighting anymore because I was already gone inside. Over the next few weeks, I quietly prepared for my exit. I met with a divorce attorney to understand my rights and what I'd likely lose. Georgia follows equitable distribution laws, so assets are divided fairly, though not necessarily equally. We had 5 years of equity in our house. My retirement savings were larger than hers, and our debts were manageable. I started gathering every financial document, copying everything important, and opened a new bank account for my paychecks. I left just enough in the joint account to cover bills, nothing more. Julia noticed a shift, but she didn't seem to know how to respond. She made small gestures, cleaning here, cooking there, but it all felt forced. Not genuine, not out of care. More like fear. She sensed I was slipping away, but didn't understand that it was already too late. About 6 weeks after the "I'm not your cook" moment, Julia was served divorce papers at home while I was at work. I'd planned it that way, not out of cruelty, but to avoid the emotional chaos that would come with doing it face-to-face. She called me immediately, her voice trembling. "What is this? Are you serious? You're divorcing me over one comment." Her disbelief was almost painful to listen to, as if she'd never imagined I'd actually follow through. That evening, when I returned home, Julia was waiting with a long speech rehearsed. She apologized for her words that night, saying she'd been stressed and didn't mean it. She said she loved me, that we could fix things, that divorce was an overreaction, but her apology didn't touch the real issue. She was sorry for what she said, not for how she'd acted. I told her calmly that this wasn't about one comment. It was about the months that came before, the laziness, the disregard, the lack of appreciation. She turned our home into a place where I worked, paid, and came back to exhaustion, while she did nothing but exist in it. I told her I wasn't angry anymore, just done. Over the next few days, she went through phases. One moment she'd cry and apologize, the next she'd get defensive and blame me for being cold. She claimed I didn't understand what she'd been going through, that I'd abandoned her emotionally when she needed compassion. But the truth was, she'd had every opportunity to show effort, to meet me halfway, and she never did. When the divorce proceedings began, Julia became combative. She hired a sharp attorney who fought for a larger settlement, arguing that she'd sacrifice her career to support mine. She demanded spousal support and a big share of our assets. The process was long and draining. Julia also made it personal. She showed up unannounced at my office, trying to talk. She'd send long emotional texts late at night, swinging between begging and blaming. She called my family, hoping they'd convince me to reconsider. Through all of it, I stayed calm. I didn't respond to manipulation or drama. I handled everything through my lawyer and refused to engage in emotional games. It took nearly a year for the divorce to be finalized. In the end, Julia walked away with around 40% of our shared assets. Her share of the house equity, a portion of my retirement savings, and short-term spousal support. It was expensive, but I accepted it. I saw it as the price of freedom. Even after everything, Julia never truly acknowledged her role in what happened. She still fixated on that one night, that one sentence, "I'm not your cook," as if it had ruined an otherwise perfect marriage. She couldn't see that it was just a final straw in a long pattern of taking me for granted. 2 years have passed since then. I live alone now, in a smaller home I rent after selling the old one. My finances aren't as strong as they used to be, but my peace of mind is priceless. My stress levels are lower, my days calmer. I come home to a clean space, one I maintain myself, and eat meals I either cook or reheat from the service I still use. There's no resentment anymore, just quiet, steady contentment. I've started dating again, but I'm careful. I pay close attention to balance, to effort, appreciation, and partnership. I notice whether someone wants to build together or simply benefit, whether they see relationships as mutual or one-sided. This entire experience taught me something I wish I'd learned sooner. Being a provider doesn't mean being taken for granted. Providing doesn't make you a doormat. True partnership requires mutual respect, shared effort, and appreciation. Without that, it's not love, it's dependency. Some people told me I gave up too easily on my marriage, but they never saw what went on behind closed doors. They didn't come home every night to a partner who stayed on the couch all day, who couldn't be bothered to contribute, who dismissed the simplest request for support with contempt. A real marriage isn't about gender roles. It's about fairness. If one person is working 60-hour weeks, the other should manage what they can at home. That's not tradition. That's teamwork. Julia never understood that. She wanted comfort without contribution, stability without effort. Walking away wasn't failure. It was self-respect. Sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is accept that something is broken beyond repair and choose peace over pretense. If you're in a relationship where you give everything while receiving nothing in return, where your efforts are dismissed instead of appreciated, you're not obligated to keep sacrificing yourself. You deserve a partner who values you, not someone who treats your support as an entitlement. Freedom has a price, yes, but it's worth paying when the reward is your self-respect. Living alone but at peace is far better than living with someone who sees you as an ATM instead of a partner. The hardest part of leaving isn't the paperwork. It's accepting that love without respect isn't really love. Once you recognize that, walking away stops feeling like loss and starts feeling like liberation.